How many of you know Brian Page or Grant Cardone or Mr. Airbnb who have been selling courses online to teach you that how you can build a short-term rental business on Airbnb and make millions of dollars every single month? I know a lot of people got sucked into it and they have purchased those courses and then established those businesses, and some of them have been successful as well. But not a lot of them are really making money. And now we're seeing Canadian government, starting from BC, are completely banning short-term rental across the province, and BC is the starting point. My suspicion is this is going to be followed by other provinces like Ontario at some point, because this housing crisis is brewing so much that there's a lot of pressure on municipalities and provincial governments and the federal government as well to solve that. So apologies for this whole setup. I'm actually shooting this video from my mom's apartment. This is basically the living room that you can see. But anyway, I have this setup already ready for the shooting. So what BC did, BC actually announced a ban starting from May 1st next year that you are not allowed to rent out your rental property as a short-term rental anymore. You're only allowed to list your primary residence. Let's say if you have a basement or you have a spare room that you can rent out on this short-term rental website, but that's it. There is no more the entire home that you can rent out as you have been doing it over the years. And this is, I think I can take the critics from both sides. Some people think this is a right move because there's not enough inventory for people to live. So if that inventory is pushed into the long-term lease, people will have choices to basically rent those properties for the long term and then have a place to live. Perfect argument. But this is also very difficult for homeowners who are struggling to deal with those tenants who are not even paying rents or delaying rents or having issues with the property, and they're not able to kick that tenant out because of the landlord and tenant board laziness. Because of that, they're forced to find another avenues to make money off. So they're both sort of stories, but I think the reality is in the BC province from May 1st, this ban is going to be effective. So a lot of people who have built those businesses to run short-term rental on Airbnb, on other websites, they will no longer be able to operate anymore because the listings won't be allowed to be listed on Airbnb, and the people who have built those businesses, hired employees, will have to be laid off, and then this is how this is completely going to be changed. So if I look at Vancouver alone, right now we have 6,500 active listings on Airbnb only in Vancouver. I'm not talking about the entire province, only in Vancouver. And out of that, 80% of them are entire suite, entire home. So imagine if that entire inventory comes into the market for resale, what's going to happen with the property market? Think about that. Not everybody will be able to lease it out for long term, because if you have purchased the property in the last 2 years, right? The interest rate was so low back then. Now the cost doesn't make sense. The cash flow doesn't make sense to lease it out for a long term. So those investors who have purchased those properties in the last 2 years specifically to run it as a short-term rental, they will find themselves into hot waters and will be forced to sell that property. And that excess inventory will actually flood the market from a resale perspective, and the property prices will further come down. And this is just Vancouver. There might be other cities with similar listings across BC. And think about that, if Ontario also follow the steps, what's going to happen in Ontario with regards to real estate market? So there's a lot of downward pressure coming into the housing market. The inventory is gradually building up. We're seeing these bans coming across from other governments to stop the short-term rental and bring that inventory back into the resale market or into the long-term lease will actually help from an affordability perspective, but also it will hurt the investors who have purchased those properties in the last 2 years when the rates were so low. Now if they want to lease it out for long term, it won't make sense from a numbers perspective, so they may be forced to sell those properties at a loss. at a loss. So this is a big trouble for those investors, to be honest. And I know that, you know, if I was an investor, I would do the same thing, because if I put a permanent tenant in there, the LTB is so inefficient, I cannot get the tenant out easily. It will cost me so much trouble and money and time. If the tenant stops paying rent, I can't do anything, right? This is one of the major reasons why the investors were rushing towards the short-term rental idea, because they don't want to deal with that mess with LTB in Ontario. I guess it's a similar situation in BC as well. So I think the story goes both ways, right? So we have both sides of arguments. You know, this is needed for affordability, but at the same time, the investors who have purchased those properties are going to get hurt, and they're going to get big losses in terms of either keeping the negative cash flow on those long-term lease, or take a big loss in terms of selling that property. Anyway, you let me know what you think. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.